Looking like a hot mess. I already know it. Um, I think we're gonna get some steps in, and I think that we'll go into Target. Maybe I won't buy anything. We'll see how that goes. So, those who logged in, appreciate y'all, and then also like, of course, you can watch this later. Some people might really be in school. I know today is November 8th, Tuesday. Go out and vote. Um, I know I'm about to. I just took a nice time to go get a workout in. So, excuse me, what you guys came here for? Let's cut to the chase. So, we are talking about school. What kind of school? How much school? For basically like sports medicine, professional sports. When it comes to professional sports, when it comes to the NBA, like obviously I won't speak for like every single like professional sports. I will say I have been in interviews for sports other than or pro sports other than the NBA. So I mean, so I'm not saying this can't apply to other people. So I don't want people to be discouraged or think it's only NBA, even though I did put NBA. Because, caveat, I will speak onto what I did. There are other people who have done other things as I park. There's people who've done other things with um, getting into the NBA. So let me turn my music off. There we go. There we go. Okay. There's other people. There's people who've done other things. I'm gonna take this off. I think I'm done sweating for right now. And to Target. I just sorry for those all that noise here. Um, so we want to start off. When I get in the store, I think it won't be as noisy. So we could try that. So here we are. We're gonna make this quick-ish. I think doing a whole hour is not really helping some people. So thank you for the chat. So as Jonathan, I am in the master's program for athletic training. Yes. So um, I'm going to talk a little bit about that too. So I'm going to talk about athletic training and physical therapy. It's a little windy right now in Oklahoma, so you're not going to be able to hear me as well. So I'm going to head inside so I can also get some steps in. So hold on. I'm almost there, like 10 seconds. 10 seconds. Okay. I think you guys can be able to hear me now. So thank you for all the students that reached out. I'm sorry it's been a little busy. We're in season. So when it comes to that, I may not be able to talk to students as much. So me doing these random like live sessions is a lot. Hopefully, you can get more students, um, get more students information to know like what's the best thing for them, what they want to do, just options for them. So because a lot of times it's like last minute, we got in like after 1:30, went to bed after 2:30. So just pop it on here. So there's some people that they're in athletic training school. Some people logging in are in physical therapy school. Some people I know, some people I don't know. So I just want to like help those understand for um, for professional sports. Like if you think of like your MLS, your MLB, NFL, NBA, they those organizations, those entities, and there's probably some I'm missing. They want an athletic trainer on staff and they want a physical therapist on staff. So when it comes to those who are already in physical therapy school and you're like, I don't want to go back to school for athletic training, those are some of the options. Just knowing that all these entities have to hire a physical therapist. So keeping that in mind. I'll get into more detail later. But athletic and also athletic training. So we need to have an athletic trainer on staff. So if we think about how professional sports is, it's only 1 to 2% of the entire like sports medicine profession. Even as a physician, even as chiropractor, anything, is only 1 to 2%. So for example, if there are, which there are way more, but say for example, for easy math, 500,000 physical therapists, only 1 to 2% of those 500,000 even work in professional sports, and that includes like your MLS, your UFC, your NBA, NFL, all that good stuff. So if I'll start with just talking about what I did, and then we can kind of branch out a couple of things. I know I can probably stretch this into another video of what other people have done that I've met along the way, people I know right now, for those things. So we'll start off with undergrad. I went to the University of Georgia. I double majored. That's not something you have to do, but I double majored. I did exercise sports science because it was like pre-physical therapy. I thought I wanted to do physical therapy. And then I did athletic training. Athletic training at that time was a bachelor's degree. So obviously now, as we look, athletic training is a master's degree. So for me, at that moment, I graduated from undergrad. I was able to sit for my boards for athletic training. Once I got into the athletic training program, I loved it a lot. I didn't know if I wanted to do physical therapy because I was I was bored. Pre-physical therapy in undergrad, to be honest, was very. I was like, ugh, I'm not liking this. But my mom was like, just apply to one school, and I was like, made that little deal with her, and that's what happened. Got into physical therapy school. So I didn't take my boards right away. But you could say it was right away just because there was a gap between there was like a 2 3 week gap between undergrad and my doctorate program. So did my doctorate in physical therapy at Emory University in Atlanta. Obviously, you can go to any school you want to if you want to do that route. While I was in my first year of the first semester of the program, I decided to go ahead and take my boards for athletic training because I wanted to get some type of experience. I knew if I get experience, whether it's volunteering or um, acting as an athletic trainer, I would get some experience. Little did I know, which I'm telling students now, you don't have to do athletic training while you're in physical therapy school, only if you feel like you can handle your caseload, like your coursework. If you feel like you can handle your coursework and volunteer to events, so there's almost always going to be some type of like running race or like some basketball event, some AAU tournament, something, and volunteer that route. So no, if you're not an athletic trainer, you're not going to go in there tell them you're an athletic trainer because that's obviously bad. You're not going to do that. You're not going to get in trouble with the law. But you can be a first responder. So in order to be a first responder, though, then you have to do first responder training. So I didn't know these things until like I got into physical therapy school. So helping other athletic training or those who are not athletic trainers are not going to do athletic training, don't want to go that route. You can do, there's two companies. There's only one that I keep remembering, keep forgetting the other one. It's on the APTA website, the American Physical Therapy Association.org. And you can look for Conjent Steps. And there's another one that I cannot remember the name. Those two companies, but in this one in particular, they have like an emergency response, like a certification, and they have one specifically for athletes. So, say if you were going to cover a football event, and it could be like, it could be anything small. It doesn't have to be these big things to get some experience because sometimes with these like little Pop Warner or these little soccer tournaments that they have, softball, they'll have softball events. A lot of times, parents there, you'll be able to connect with them, and then you can start having some more opportunities. So, for example, a lot of times covering these events, wherever you live. Like at that time, I was living in Georgia, Atlanta. So at that time, you were meeting some of these parents were like physicians. They were um, dental hygienists that actually were friends with someone else in the medical field. And then I just opened doors because I did the route where it's like sending emails. Like I knew like, oh, the Atlanta Hawks is gonna be working with they are partnering with Emory. So I just thought like, oh yeah, let me just email the physician that works with the Hawks. That didn't work out. Nobody responded, and that's usually how it goes. Don't take it personal. A lot of times people in the league, even people who work in my positions, they don't answer people. They don't feel the need to answer people, and unfortunately, they're busy, so they don't do that. So I always suggest like if you can go and do it's called ERA on Congent Steps. You can even Google Congent Steps, COGENT steps, and you can go ahead and look up the ERA certification. So basically, first responder. As a first responder, you can cover basketball events. You can cover other sporting events. You do not have to be an athletic trainer to do so, but do not claim that you're an athletic trainer if you're not an athletic trainer. Even if you're an athletic training student, do not say you're an athletic trainer. Just make sure, keep that in mind. So moving on to then what I did, I took my boards my first semester of PT school because, to be honest, because I did athletic training, PT school was very easy, and that's just for me. I felt really bored, so I say bored first, like in the beginning of it, because it was a lot of like didactic material that we already learned for athletic training school. So obviously, those out there who are in your master's program, I think Jonathan says you're in a master's of athletic training. Do consider, if that's something you want to do, getting that doctorate, not your doctorate in athletic training. I know that sounds crazy. There's going to be other athletic trainers or people in the scholastic realm, academic realm, that'll say, do your doctorate in athletic training. Don't do that because it doesn't equate to getting more money as a doctor of athletic training. I'm just putting that out there. I don't know when that will happen, but I know athletic trainers are demanding um, more money, try to bill for services through insurance, et cetera, et cetera. That has not been done yet until athletic trainers can actually advocate for themselves a little bit more. And a lot of it's in the academic realm. So at the end of the day, whether you have a doctorate in athletic training or you have a master's in athletic training, or me, I have a bachelor's in athletic training. Obviously, it was when the certification process was the accredited program, the KD program, which is the governing body. It was a bachelor's at that time when I was in school. So all of that is, I'm qualified. So you don't have to do a doctorate in athletic training. Don't let anyone tell you have to do a doctorate in athletic training. Do not listen to them. I'm sorry, you're just going to put yourself in more debt, and that's not going to equate to you getting into it, professional sports. So with that being said, I got off on that tangent because I'm actually really disappointed in some schools when they tell people to do a doctorate in athletic training, unless you want to do things that deal with academics and stuff and you feel the need to do so. But it doesn't always equate. Again, doesn't always equate to getting into professional sports. Very rarely are we seeing anyone doing professional sports with a doctorate in athletic training. So I'm telling you, it's not needed. So um, I was in PT school. Obviously, we did anatomy, physiology. We do the same thing in athletic training. We didn't get into our like clinical rotations until maybe our second year, which most PT programs are like their third year, but ours was different. Emory was just different. It was okay. It was helpful because I had my athletic training experience already, that when I got into these clinical rotations for like acute care, stuff like that, it was great. I just got to learn a little bit more of the hospital side, SNF. I got to learn a little bit more of the rehab side. Got some of that in athletic training, but it was mostly sports related or post surgical. So it was actually good to get kind of like um, a different feel of like chronic stuff, because in professional sports, it's not always acute. When I say acute, meaning like, oh, they sprained their ankle and they have pain, and we saw the ankle sprain, et cetera, et cetera. Sometimes it's people with back pain. Back pain doesn't always mean like, oh, you box someone out and you hurt your side or something. It could be just like they came in with back pain. They got traded to your team and they have back pain. Like it could be anything, any of those things. So that's chronic pain, something that's older, something some people may say 6 months. Some studies even show 3 months, or it could be part of their career. At this point where they've had knee surgery, came to your team, and when they like the knee surgery was like a year ago, but sometimes they have intermittent knee pain. So that's some of the stuff that like that chronic stuff was helpful doing physical therapy school. Not saying I worked with athletes necessarily in my physical therapy program, but you can kind of put two and two together. And as you get orthopedics, your orthopedics is like the orthopedic classes, the orthopedic rotations that you may have, you do outpatient. That really helps when you're doing professional sports, because when you get into these professional sports realms, I'm just letting you know, your skill set most likely will suffer because you're working with a subgroup that is like the elite of the elite. Okay, these elite athletes are obviously 1 to 2% of like all peeps. Like their wingspan is crazy, or say if they were a swimmer, like you're looking at all these different things. Look, they're not normal humans, so you can't you can't like equate everything to them. But I would say like you working with them year after year after year, you're not going to be able to um, you're not going to see like, oh, the lady that comes in with back pain, the lady that has issues with her ADLs, so those things. So I would say like getting your basics down with schooling was like very helpful for me. So the athletic training program was helpful, and then physical therapy, my doctorate in physical therapy, master's program now with athletic training. It's still pretty good. I would definitely advise people, if you're interested in doing that, do your master's in athletic training. Let's see here. Understanding that, like, that 2 years means you can major, and this is something I wish someone told me when I was in school. In undergrad, you can major in whatever you want. So if you don't want to do athletic training school, you want to do physical therapy school. If you want to do athletic training school, but you don't want to do physical therapy school, it doesn't matter. It is a postgraduate degree, meaning after you graduate from undergrad, you just have to make sure you do your prerequisites required of the schools of who you're applying to, and do whatever other testing requirements that's required. I know the GRE, talking to students, that's not necessarily something they look for. Cool. So keeping that in mind, like, I've met people who were doing art history, they're doing all these different majors, and I was like, wow, they were versed in other things. So then when they graduated and they didn't want to do, say, like, they wanted to do some type of leadership, they want to partner with like big schools like Georgia Tech, or they want to do things with marketing and physical therapy and like ergonomics and military, or even if you think about like what professional sports is actually entertainment. I don't think people think about that. And sports medicine is still part of the entertainment business. Um, I probably won't go into details on that because that's a whole separate video. But majoring in undergrad, whatever you want to, and then doing your master's in athletic training and or your physical therapy doctorate, is clinical doctorate, is like the way to go, because then you're multifaceted, you're versed in so many good things. So I feel like I need to find these. Okay, there's chats. There we go. Oops, sorry. Jonathan also say, so would you say to get into the MBA, get a DPT also, or is a master's in AT? Okay, yes, this is a good question. So, say if you're someone who's already in their master's in athletic training, or in athletic training school, or yeah, let's start with that first. Let's start with that scenario. So you have your master's in athletic training, or you're in your master's program for athletic training. I will tell you, you have to think about how many fish in the sea are doing the same thing you're doing. And I also speak that for physical therapists. I think people don't understand, like, yes, you're doing a doctorate, it's amazing. Yes, you're doing a master's, that's amazing. But no, it's no longer viewed as like, oh my gosh, you're part of the elite. Like, oh, who is that person? I need to like get in touch with that person to work for my team. So I think like keeping that in mind, where it's like you want to stand out, you want to be the strongest candidate for any professional team that comes your way. And you want to make sure, not saying you have all the degrees in the universe, because you're not trying to intimidate people, because unfortunately you'd be surprised, some people say like they felt intimidated by looking at your resume. But I would say going beyond getting that master's in athletic training is helpful. Not saying you cannot work to get into that realm, but just know other people are doing the same exact thing you're doing with just one degree. And I say one degree, I'm not talking about undergrad, like your undergrad degree. I'm talking about your master's or your doctorate degree. So those, for those who've done their doctorate in physical therapy, just understanding that there are a lot of other people now, whether you're black, Indian, Asian, white, whatever color you are, they're doing their doctorate in physical therapy as well. And now there's programs that are making it easier to get your doctorate in physical therapy, whether it's a hybrid program, whether it's so basically like online and some in person. I even noticed how one was like completely um, intern somewhere, and that internship served as like a great clinical rotation. So they can use that clinical rotation or that internship as experience to get their doctorate in physical therapy. So while they're already getting experience with a professional team, and then they're becoming like even more competitive in that realm. So in that case, that's different. But I would say that person did a route. These particular people did their undergrad slash masters in, like, strength conditioning, something in that realm. But not saying that couldn't happen for physical therapy. Just know you would have to like really land a great internship, where that it will help you while you're, which is a lot of stress, where you're in the internship program. So like, the NFL, they'll have like internship things they'll post on LinkedIn or something. Like, you apply for one of those. They do cater to more getting athletic training students, so be aware of that. So as you're like doing your master's program in athletic training, or doing your doctorate in physical therapy, you're trying to like balance all that. It can happen, but just know, like, it's so it's hard work for sure. It almost takes the place of doing a residency or fellowship. So I think that's like a really good thing to look into. But again, they're only going to hire most likely one person for that internship, while you then add your program onto the hybrid programs that they have for physical therapy or the 1 year programs. Which I think that's crazy. But if you're getting great experience at your internship, then you might be fine. So something I will say, like, look into doing more school. But the caveat is, if you're a physical therapist, just know, yes, there's a lot of other people doing physical therapy degrees, but almost no, every team that's NFL, that's I think that includes MLB, NFL, MLB, obviously NBA. Like, you have to have a physical therapist, and if you think about it, obviously those who are not in this arena, you probably wouldn't know. So then let me just tell you. So just a little bit of information out there. There are governing bodies. So, like, I think most people know there's something called, like, um the NBATA, which is like the Athletic Training Association of the NBA. So that means Athletic Training Association of the NBA, athletic trainer of the NBA. But if you are a physical therapist and they hire you as a physical therapist, you're not part of the NBATA. So you're someone else on staff that is, basically, there are responsibilities, there's duties, and there's also benefits of being that part of the NBATA. But thinking of, like, even the NFL has their version, like other organizations have their version of athletic trainers. If you're a physical therapist, they can hire you on as a physical therapist. Just knowing that you're still a little bit limited. When I say limited, limited in the fact of, like, when you get into these arenas, like, you want to, if that's your desire to get into these arenas and then progress, obviously the organization has to see, like, you're growing and stuff like that. But just knowing, like, if you have your dual degree, your physical therapy athletic training, or you have a little bit more of, like, which I'll talk about a little bit more, like, even most post-doctorate work or post-master work, that also helps. So for example, you do your master's athletic training, you're like, I'm not trying to do my physical therapy, I just don't want to do it. Then thinking about doing another degree in your for masters, which will be very helpful. So for example, if you're thinking about I'm going to do performance science. Performance science, I'm just putting that out there. Go ahead and look into that, whether you're a physical therapist or athletic trainer. That is like the next realm of professional sports. Like, yeah, you can talk about catapult, you can talk about, like force plate data, using different software to, like, calculate whether it's load management, whether it's like how a person's moving, how they're integrated, maybe like quantify fatigue and stuff like that. That's like really big. So if you want to do master's athletic training, still look into other programs, whether it's a 1 year program, um, allow you to get either certification or the degree, and looks into performance science. So then that gives you some other competitive advantage instead of doing your doctorate. But I will say, if you did your master's athletic training and you go ahead and do your doctorate of physical therapy, you will be competitive, and then school won't really be hard for you. Like, there's not much of a difference between maybe like another 9 months. Um, if you add on, yes, it's 3 years, but if you look into all that, it's like worth it. And there's some programs, I think, like Idaho State University, and then I think Shenandoah has dual programs. So those who are undergrad listening or going to listen, there are doctorate of physical therapy programs and master's athletic training programs that are wrapped into one. That would be about a total of like 4 years, instead of doing 2 years your master's degree and then another 3 years for your doctorate of physical therapy. Who knows out there if they will ever do, like, transitional programs, hybrid programs, stuff that will allow you to say, oh, I did my master's athletic training. Can I go ahead and do my doctorate in physical therapy? Let me do that hybrid program because I qualify to say I only need to do one to 1.5 years of school to get my doctorate in physical therapy. So some of the things, like, to keep that in mind. Some of those programs may open up a little bit more, and keep an eye on that. So say if you're like, oh, I'm a physical therapy student, I'm going to do physical therapy school, I don't want to do athletic training, I don't want to go back and get my master's in athletic training, even though I know probably won't be that hard. I will say, if you're into doing that, I would say do it. A lot of teams like the idea of, how do I say this in a respectful manner? A lot of teams like the idea that, oh, you can get your hands dirty, like you're not too good to clean tables, stuff like that. So a lot of times physical therapists are like, oh, I check in, I do my job, whether it's your clinic rotation, whether that's your job, like outpatient clinic or acute care, sniff, whatever. You clock in at a certain time, you do your work, see your patients, do your notes, and then you go ahead and then clock out for the day. Athletic training, professional sports, there's no such thing. So as I was saying, like last night, we got in like 1:30 in the morning kind of thing. Like, if I was a physical therapist, and I worked in a clinic, I didn't work in professional sports, I would probably be like, no, that's after hours, 1:30 in the morning, because we had a game, we had to travel back, all that good stuff. But keeping that in mind, teams like the idea of you being able to do your athletic training, knowing that athletic training, a lot of times you're not crazy on like, oh, this is my schedule hours, this and that. Yes, for any program, you have to do like, 400 hours or whatever it is now per semester. But they understand like if there's a game and it goes a little bit past like the time you you're covered or your salary as a doctor of physical therapy, like different things like that, they'll know like, okay, you're willing to do that. You know about basic skills like taping ankles, stuff like that. So those who are in physical therapy school are physical therapists. Thinking about only doing physical therapy school, look into things then, just like we talked about before, contingent steps for getting your first responder. And I'll tie into that what I was going to say next. So for athletes, so that will help. Also, say when teams are looking at you. Also look into other programs that allow, or just some type of training or something to show like, hey, you worked on. I know this sounds crazy, but listen, to look into like ankle taping, finger, thumb, hand, ankle tape, foot taping, stuff like that. That will go a long way because it shows you have something else you can bring to the table instead of just doing manual therapy, stuff like that. Yeah, that's kind of like basic stuff. I don't need to go too much in detail that I lose somebody. So also, what makes you be above and beyond, say if you don't want to do athletic training school, you're a physical therapy student, doing a residency / doing a fellowship. So, and I say and or. I did both, and again, all I knew was there was no one before me. There was no one in the NBA. So yes, I am the first Black female physical therapist athletic trainer in the NBA. Not taking that lightly, but it's to share and help somebody else. So hopefully it'll be easier for someone else behind me, which I'm seeing now more and more people, which is awesome, of different ethnicities in the NBA. And I know that's going on too in other sports, obviously. Like people are just being great. But I will say, like, doing residency helps me. So it gave me a framework that was a little bit more specific to sports. So I did a sports physical therapy residency. I know orthopedic residency was something I could have done, but I knew with orthopedics, it wasn't necessarily going to help me exactly with bridging. It bridges for me. I'm saying this for me. It bridged the athletic training and physical therapy together. And then those who didn't do athletic training, talking to those residents or graduate residents that they didn't do athletic training, did physical therapy, did their sports residency, it helped them actually be able to um, blend easier into the sports setting, whether that was college sports, because that's just as busy. It can be just as busy as pro sports, but also for pro sports, it helps them. And then it gave them almost like an edge. So not just competitive, but keep you in the league. So if we think about like how some players may be like 3 years in the league, sometimes some um, physical therapists or athletic trainers, when they get hired, they may only be 1 to 2 years. So with that sense, keeping that in mind, like you want to be competitive, you want to stay there as long as you want to stay there. When it's time for you to go, it's your decision, and it's not based on, well, so and so's coming in more qualified. Because yeah, there will be always people who have more experience than you and stuff like that. But if you have your degrees, your licenses, and then you have a residency or a fellowship, you're already ahead of the game. So keeping that in mind to keep you as competitive as possible. And then those who go to residency, every residency program is not exactly the same. They have certain didactic things that they need to keep in mind. But say, for example, at Duke University, you're working with just high school and there's like a clinic. That clinic, there's a variety of people. It's not just like your sports athletes, your high school athletes. It's sometimes people in their 80s and stuff like that. So I would say something, keep that in mind. And then also when it comes to say like VCU or something, and maybe collegiate sports, like so just knowing like what residency program you're doing, so you're not upset. So I would say like I knew maybe about that residency. The one I chose which was Duke, was high school, but I thought it was enough experience. And then when it came to actually talking to some teams, it wasn't really enough. So for example, in high school sports, you most likely will not have a strength conditioning coach. Even some of these um, academies, they may not have a strength conditioning coach. And understanding when you get into professional sports, whether that's baseball, soccer, there's going to be a strength and conditioning coach. Even if you have that degree and you practice a little bit of that, they will still hire someone in strength and conditioning. So you need to know how to work with those people. You need to know how to work with a nutritionist. You need to know how to work with or dietitian. You need to know how to work with a sports scientist. So there will be sports scientists for any of these professional teams. Keeping that in mind, whatever sport that you're working with, there will be a sports scientist. You understand a little lingo. So I would say me doing a fellowship was very helpful. This is not something you have to do. It's just for me. I knew, again, there's no one that looked like me in the NBA, and I knew I needed to go above and beyond. So hopefully it can help someone else so that they don't have to do all of what I did. So the fellowship gave me more autonomy, helped me work a lot with the strength conditioning coaches, also worked with a dietitian, the chiropractor that we even had an OD. We had a lot of different people on staff, which were very similar to what it looked like in pro sports. And then you have your caseload. Yes, I had a caseload at like the sports medicine clinic, which I actually saw some athletes, weekend warriors, and stuff like that, which was really good. I went to Wake Forest. So if you're interested, Wake Forest is a really great program. And then I actually had athletes that needed to get back into playing, whether that was basketball, field hockey, soccer, football. So understanding like I had that versus when I was at Duke, I did not get some of those experiences, and that's okay. As a fellow, you can get some of those experiences. So I know there's some questions that I missed, so let's go figure out. I'm trying to figure out. Okay, let's see here. Master's program in AT from you, currently in PT school. Master program in AT from University of Houston. Okay, so I guess you're saying you went to the University of Houston for the AT program and you're currently in PT school, which is awesome. I think that's like a great thing to be in. Biggest thing I would say, like, since you're in PT school now, you already have maybe the clinical experience. You're getting some of the didactic material. I would please keep in mind like things like the CSM. CSM is the combined sections meeting. So for those who are in PT school or even after you finish PT school, look into going to that, not because you're trying to learn the material, but because you're trying to network with people. And that's where I got most of my networking. Now is that it's in person, there's no longer worrying about with COVID, it looks like. You get in there and you just network your butt off. Make sure your LinkedIn is up to date. Doesn't have to be anything special. Just have the schools you went to, the school you're attending. Make sure you have a resume. Make sure you have physical copies of your resume. Make sure you have some type of business cards. And I'm saying just go to stinking Office Depot, get some business cards. Um, and then, the basic attire of like could be a polo and a khaki pants. That's totally fine as well. You'll have a name tag, so that works. So, but if you want to rep your school, having the polos for your school will be great. You're trying to start conversation and you just want to get an idea of like what to ask for, how to start the conversation. Look out. We'll probably do another video on that because I think that not just CSM but just networking. I feel like a lot of people don't know because if you network the right way, it will open some crazy doors. And I got some crazy stories of networking. So I definitely want to share that to help you guys out because it wasn't just like I did these degrees and then boom, I got a job and I got all these job offers. That's not what happened. There was a lot of networking that took place. And using social media in a way that was almost drawing people in to know like, hey, I know what I'm talking about. I know what I have going on. Obviously, I'm not saying I know everything, but just show like, hey, like, take that chance on me. So that's something to look into. But just thoughts on that. And then last thing I think I saw is the pay worth it to get into the NBA as a AT or a dual ATP DPT. Okay, this is a really good question. Okay, so we already talked about how the pay, or no, we didn't talk about the pay. We already talked about how there's like 1 to 2% of like athletic trainers and then 1 to 2% of physical therapists make it into the NBA or professional sports in general. So then you got to understand the pay. So if we know whether you got your master's or doctorate in athletic training, unfortunately, that does not matter. If you got your bachelor's in athletic training, because of the age, because I'm telling my age right now, that does not matter. And if you got your physical therapy, yeah, that does not matter if that makes sense. So whether you got your bachelor's in athletic training because that's when it was required, you got your master's in athletic training, you got your doctorate in athletic training. How you get compensated in the NBA and in other sports, if you actually look into it, it doesn't matter. What matters is then would be like the other degrees you have. So for example, if you had your master's in athletic training, you had your master's in like public health or something, that might equate, but then they also look into experience. And experience will sometimes look into not just your college experience, meaning like working in college or your residency fellowship or being in a clinic or something like that. They may look at also NBA experience. So understand that you will still get lowballed no matter who you are. It also means even as a physical therapist, if you just do your physical therapy degree, um, there is still a there's almost like a cutoff, but that's way higher, to be honest, than athletic training. So keep that in mind. So with physical therapists, you're held to even more of a higher standard, and maybe in 5 years from now, this might change. I'm just speaking for what's going on right now and what's been happening the past 5 years, as this doctor athletic training is like picking up speed and a little bit of steam. It's not equating to getting more money, and I know talking to other people outside of professional sports is the same thing. It's not always equating unless you're in academia. So we're talking about this sense. So just understand whether you're a physical therapist, athletic trainer, or dual degree, you probably will get lowballed regardless. But the type of lowballing you experience can equate to what your degrees entail. So, for example, if you have two licenses, 2 degrees, 2 licenses, meaning I'm not talking about you did your master's athletic training, you sat and took your boards, you have a license now, license whatever state you're in, right? That's one license. But you went back and did your master's in public health, that may not equate to a license, that may equate to a degree. But if I went back and did my doctorate in physical therapy and then I take my boards, I potentially have another license, So at this point, so speaking on myself and other people I know around the league, um, and also like in other realms, they have their license or their degree in physical therapy, license and degree in athletic training. So that dual degree equates to 2 licenses, which you do the math, you probably will get some more money even though you get lowballed, and a lot of times the lowballing happens because you're new into the league, they don't know how you're going to, be. And unfortunately, as a female, you also get lowballed. It happens, it is what it is. It's nothing new. Research already shows as you're a female in professional sports and even just in work in general, you most likely get lowballed. So keep that in mind. Um, so as a male, it's probably gonna be a little bit better, but then also too, depending where you're coming from. So if you're a physical therapist and you graduate your physical therapy degree, you decided to work and you worked your way up into like maybe a clinical director, stuff like that, you most likely will not be making, below 60 or whatever. But also keep in mind, there's almost like a hierarchy. So um, the longer you're in the league, most likely the more you'll get paid, depending on your experience as well, depending if you're male and female, but then also dual degree. So for me, they and some other people get started off this way. G League, so called Gatorade League, minor league. So you're doing um, Major League Baseball and stuff like that. They'll have like these minor leagues. So understand, yes, you're gonna get lowballed. So lowballed in the sense of when I started, yes, I had my dual degree. Yes, I did a residency. Yes, I did a fellowship, but I was getting paid the amount of like a physical therapist. Yeah, as a physical therapist, um, I would say like entry level working in Atlanta. So that's something. And then knowing that depending on your contract and what you negotiate, each year they keep you on or however it gets, like your salary gets higher. So I was like, keep that in mind. I'm not saying for every single person, but usually you're not going to do 1 year in the NBA or NFL and then you're just going to have the same salary the next year. There's going to be some type of change, whether it's an increment, a small increment or something. So uh, like keep that in mind in that sense. What else? Also, when it's time for negotiation, where it's like you're doing such a great job, so that's another thing. Do such a great job, then it's like, you might either get an extension, you may get, something in your, sorry, I'm being distracted, hearing some noise. You might get some, either some people believe in bonuses, some people actually believe in like, no, we're going to do a whole new contract. So for me, for example, my first year, I already told you I was making like entry level physical therapy and I'm like a duly credentialed person. So I already knew what was going on. They got to see what I was about. They're taking a chance, just like anybody would take a chance on anyone. But I knew I was going to do well. I knew God placed me here for a reason. So then it came to did that 1 year, and then an opportunity opened up, and I had to do a new contract. And I did a new contract. It was very competitive because guess what? There were other places that were like, "Hey, we want to talk to Vanessa. So that also, keep that in mind. Um, like knowing that, so say if you get into the league, it's not saying like, oh, you're stuck in your salary, you're not stuck in like your role and stuff like that. Knowing obviously what the growth aspect is, but there might be other teams that might be interested in you, might be other professions that are interested in you. And if a team slash organization likes you enough, they may actually push to giving you more money, more benefits, so stuff like that, to keep that in mind. So for example, I would say like with the salary aspect, knowing that if you're working in a clinic or you're working with like a high school or something like that, the benefits are not going to be the same as when you're with the NBA or NFL and stuff. So for example, yeah, we do, yeah, like we'll charter and stuff like that, but just understand like there's things that come with it. Those things, they may be like, um, some people may get free tickets. I'm not saying I do, but just saying some of the things could be like free tickets to games. It could be like benefits with like continuing education, like the amount of money you get. Um, what paying, maybe help paying for school or post doctorate school, like some of the things that you have to know, like what your organization will cover. So if, say for example, like, oh, I want to do a manual fellowship, and they say, oh, we'll pay for it, pay for part of it, stuff like that, while you're already hired, that still is more than a salary, and then that helps you and it helps them. So it's like a, an exchange, a great exchange. So keep that in mind when you then obviously finish your first year, or for some people it could be their first contract, there's going to be negotiation. It will then be a little bit more competitive. So I would say like I'm making more than the average physical therapist, and I'm making more than the average athletic trainer. But understanding there's still levels. So for example, I know I could be making way more, but I understand it's still a business, and knowing those things, keeping that in mind, you'll know like some things that you can kind of push for, and then also knowing where you live. So I think people need to understand that. So like, say if you are in Atlanta, you'll know like what the going price is for a competitor, or for like an athletic trainer and for a physical therapist. Say if you got years of experience, there's like formulas out there that obviously I can't share you, because that is actually something that would be more of like a survey, so you get an idea of like what other people are making in the league. So they do that in other entities, so that kind of helps you as well, whether it's like where you live, et cetera, et cetera. So cost of living index, that usually plays a role. So for example, if I lived in Memphis versus I lived in Atlanta versus I lived in New York, my salary should not be the same, whether I am an athletic trainer hired as a physical therapist. So some of those things to keep that in mind. So obviously I should be getting paid more if I lived in New York versus when I lived in Memphis. So knowing you can't compare it like apples to apples, you do have to equalize it in a way that, there's an index you multiply it for, to know, is my salary competitive enough as an athletic trainer, as a physical therapist, as a dually credentialed person. And then also just having conversations with other people in the league will be helpful. But just understanding before you get into the league, whether you're athletic trainer, physical therapist, or dually credentialed, you're going to get lowballed. I'm sorry, it is what it is. So they just want to know, do you want it bad enough? If not, the guy down the street wants it just as bad. So they'll do that, and then as I would say, prove yourself, then we'll see if it goes higher, all that good stuff, and understanding the ranks of leadership, or in more leadership roles, like improving on those things, like actually just growing in the ranks. That also is a little bit easier. Say if you are a physical therapist, athletic trainer, versus just being an athletic trainer versus being a physical therapist, just understanding like that stuff still plays a role. So just know, if you're just like, oh, I just want to work in the NBA or NFL and that's it, then do what you got to do to try to get in, and just know it's going to be a little harder if you're just a physical therapist. It's going to be a little harder if you're an athletic trainer. Not saying it's impossible, so keep that in mind. So either way, you have to do some type of like networking, or you have to do some type of networking, unless you have a cousin or something that's going to vouch for you in a way that they're going to do whatever they can to hire you. But I know a lot of us are not in that boat. But just knowing if you're dually credentialed, it makes it a little bit easier once you get in to be able to get promoted to the next level. Whether that's like on paper, more responsibilities that equate to other things, get, starting players. Like, so that's another thing that people don't think about. Getting starters helps being able to do like other things that have like a lot of weight to it and a lot of responsibility. So I'm in the intimate section, let me move out of the way. That stuff plays a role, because then obviously it's on your resume. You get that experience, you get some of that tense experience of like, yo, can they play, can they not play, like, different things, like having conversations with the coaches, having conversations with position coaches, with your medical director, um, yeah, with the players themselves, with the GM. So stuff that understand like those things play a role, instead of like having to wait, 20 years doing something in the same position. You can make the decision like, do I want to be here any longer, or do I want to go somewhere else, or stuff like that. I think it'll be different for females and males, but also as a person, it's also new depending on like, is this money, is this pay worth it? Or it's like, well, let me stick around for a year, let me stick around for 2, 3 years, and it's like, oh, this might actually work. Or it's like you have things like you have players vouch for you because you do a good job that equates to other things. So keeping that in mind, where it's not always just the salary, but it is worth it being duly credentialed when it comes to leadership, money wise, and then when it comes to like getting out of your first contract. So some of the things I want everybody to keep in mind. We're at the 45-minute mark, and I think we are probably good. I hope I answered all the questions. I think I'm looking at everything. But for those who are still in school, keep pushing. To wrap up, like just what I did, it's just talking about. Well, I'm gonna answer that question right after this. Yeah, it's just like case. I'll answer that question. So, yeah, basically what I did was the. Sorry, let me see if I can move somewhere else. So, basically did athletic training, did physical therapy. After physical therapy, I worked for a little bit. I actually worked as a head trainer at a high school because I wanted to get some type of experience, and that's something that I knew again for me I had to do. A lot of people after me did not have to do, and some people didn't have to do that at all, and it's okay. Then, um, oh, I was able to take that head athletic training position at that high school while I was in physical therapy school because it was getting so easy. And I knew, like, say, if I was in my clinical rotations, I could work as an athletic trainer, and then I knew that was going to help with my resume. So I did that, and then that's when I found out about Duke and Duke's sports residency program. My roommate at the time was applying, so I waited. So I did it the next year, and while I knew before I was going to get in, or thinking I was going to get in, I was like, let me do travel therapy. Did travel physical therapy, and with that, I was able to get a little bit of experience in the outpatient realm, and I only did it for a few months, not a whole year, but I did acute care, and then I did outpatient. Acute care was not travel therapy, but level one trauma center with gunshot wounds, all that good stuff. So it helps on the emergency side that you deal with athletics, and then or outpatient clinic with the travel therapy helped me get an understanding of like just your everyday hustle and bustle of like chronic or acute injuries. So that helped. And then I did Duke Sports Residency. As I did Duke Sports Residency, that's when I got a more of a didactic framework of like different conditions, different things that I may have missed in school, a little bit specific for athletes, and I got like children and stuff like that as well, which is helpful because now the NBA is younger and younger. As you look around, like you have 18, 19-year-olds, stuff like that. So it was helpful doing that residency if you really want to think about it. And then I decided to do the fellowship because at that point I talked with a couple teams, and I realized after talking with them, not like a formal interview, I didn't have any strength conditioning experience. I didn't have any dietitian experience. I didn't have any like performance science experience. So understanding that, I knew I was going to be competitive enough after talking with them to even consider like, oh, let me entertain these like conversations to then maybe be an interview. And I knew I wanted to bring better to the table. So I got feedback. It was like, why don't you do a fellowship? Obviously, if there was an internship out there that I knew about, like for example, like the Indianapolis Colts, Aaron, there's a physical therapist, athletic trainer there. Obviously, a duly credentialed person, higher level, like out of this world. He does like physical therapy, athletic training, like type of internships. Obviously, if I did that, I probably wouldn't do a fellowship. But for me, I did a fellowship because I wanted to get that experience that I talked about earlier in this video. So doing that as I was in my fellowship, that's when it got really interesting. My LinkedIn was blowing up, and then people contacting our program director at Wake Forest. So, for example, we had what's that? 3 to 4 NBA teams at that point. Two schools, one schools meaning like one school I always wanted to work, but it was just like, I don't know. Now you got NBA, MLB talking to you, so I was just like, I don't know. Maybe I'll come back to college, but it was great schools that I one in particular that was my dream. But keeping that in mind, like that's what opened a lot of the stuff. Just things came my way. So I would say I didn't actually get to interview for a lot of places. A lot of them were grabbing onto me, and then it was kind of like, do I want to? Do I want to entertain it, or do I not? So then when someone, aka where I'm working now, I was offered the job, and I was just like very grateful. That's kind of how it went in that sense. So that's all I got to say, I think, in that sense. And then obviously you guys can watch the other video for the other things with like what do I do in this job. But I'm going to answer this question by Jonathan. So I heard you mention that before. Can you explain that caseload? Like all ATs or PTs don't work well. Oh, that's a good question. Yes, that's a very good question. So when it comes to caseload and say like on these teams, a lot of times no, you do not get. I'm like when I'm saying like all the players, I'm not saying like if someone shows up sick, you're not gonna work with them. But a lot of teams, or like even some like high end players, and I'm pretty sure people know, but just in case I don't say names, so I don't tell anybody's business. There's some like high end players that do not work with staff on teams. Unfortunately, some of them don't trust staff, and because that's just how they feel. It's how they feel because they're like you're hired by the GM, you're hired by the coach, et cetera, et cetera. Some of these high end like big players work with one person on their whether they hired them on the side and they said they're part of the organization. So a lot of times these players do not work with some of the medical staff that's on the team. So keeping that in mind. And then when it comes to the medical staff on teams, knowing that depending on the medical director, depending on the team, they will assign players to that medical staff, depending on the size of the staff, depending on the expertise, the experience, how you connect with players. It's not always about like how good you are at your job too. I know that sounds crazy. How much experience you have, how much experience you have with just interacting with people. So I don't want to tell my business, but I will say, in general, you do not work with every player. So even if you're with the Phoenix Suns, you're here or you're anywhere, a lot of times you're not working with everyone. Not saying, like, for example, I'm not taping someone's ankle that's not part of my caseload. I'm not saying you can't do that at all. Not saying, and it also depends on your organization. So, like, here, we're pretty, like, excuse me, when I say like a family, I would say, like, I say family, like, I would say, it's not saying, that's my player, I can't touch them. Some places are like that, so keep that in mind. Like some places are really like that, and sometimes players are also like that. It's like no, I'm trying to work with you X, Y, and Z. But say for example, it's like you need to manipulate or adjust a back or something like that. As physical therapists, we can do that. As athletic trainers, you're legally not supposed to do that. But say as a physical therapist, you're like I want to crack this person's neck X, Y, and Z. Maybe that person doesn't feel, other clinician doesn't feel comfortable doing so. I can do so, or vice versa, right? Dry needling, whatever that is. So keeping that in mind, obviously being duly credentialed exposes you to different things that you're allowed to do in your scope of practice and versus like doing athletic training. But obviously being duly credentialed gives you access to both things. But with your experience, and I would say for me doing this helped, thank God. So me being the type of person I am, I'm obviously talkative because we're at 53 minutes. I'm still talking, running my mouth, and I like to connect with people. I connect with people pretty well. I will say that about myself. Not being like prideful. I'm just saying like those are some things I know for sure. Like I can talk to like anyone, and I'm pretty real. I'm like very straightforward. But I will say, me doing my residency, my fellowship also helped with all the exposure that I had with post surgical stuff, with crazy injuries that you may see in almost all sports that were there at the schools I went to, even at Georgia. So University of Georgia, Emory has some stuff, Duke University has some stuff, Wake Forest has some stuff. I still saw some great stuff. Surgeries, with residency and fellowships, you do get to see surgery. So something I will, excuse me, say, it helped me be, I even have to like advocate for, if that makes sense. Like I was kind of like pushed, like, yo, yeah, work with our vets, work with so and so, work with so and so. Like the list goes on, and I'm very grateful. I don't take that lightly. So it's something that I'm very grateful for. But no, not everyone gets to work with all players, and a lot of times too, if you kind of think about it, like if you have like 17 players, that is a lot for one person. But again, it depends on like where you are. So say if it's MLB and obviously there's more than 17 players, you most likely will have someone else on staff. But And depending on where you are, if you have really, 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 really high end players that just like hell no, then they have their own person, then they have their own person. But a lot of times you're still going to work with that person. But not saying you get to work with every single player just because of your expertise, because of your experience. Sometimes things you're allowed and not allowed to do, some things you're good and not good at. That's kind of how that falls. I'm trying to think if there's anything else I missed. Yeah, that's all I can think of. So we're at 55 minutes, and obviously I probably got to make a couple more videos of like other stuff that kind of led into other great things that we could talk about. Feel free to keep commenting or hit me up on Instagram. I'm Vanessa DPTATC. Any of those things, just hit me with some questions, because then maybe hopefully I can turn these questions into like other talks to help other people, because I'm getting these similar questions and I'm trying to help as many people as I can. Just because we're a little tight on time with stuff in general, and I just want to make sure I can keep reaching as many people as I can. But I appreciate you guys, and enjoy the rest of your day. Go vote, all that good stuff, and talk to you guys later. Okay.